The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, lasting over 33 months, raises questions about Putin's goals despite mounting losses. Putin's persistence is driven by a complex mix of historical, cultural, and geopolitical factors. Ukraine's historical ties to Russia and its strategic significance are central to his actions. Putin views Ukraine not just as a neighboring state, but as a key part of Russia's legacy. Understanding this requires exploring the intertwined histories of both nations and the broader global power dynamics. A historical prelude. The Kievan Rus. For Putin, the idea of Russia and Ukraine as one nation is rooted in their shared history, which dates back over 1,000 years. The story begins in the 10th century with the rise of the Kievan Rus, a federation of East Slavic tribes that spanned a vast area from the Black Sea to the Baltic. The people of the Kievan Rus, who would later become the ancestors of modern-day Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians, established their capital in the city of Kiev, present-day Kyiv. The Kievan Rus flourished for around 3 centuries, during which it adopted Eastern Orthodoxy as its state religion. The state eventually fragmented, but the historical ties between the Slavic peoples lived on. Over time, much of the territory that once belonged to the Kievan Rus would come under the control of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. However, Ukraine, in particular, would become an independent entity over the subsequent centuries. Ukraine's complex relationship with Russia. During the 19th century, much of Ukraine's territory was absorbed into the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. By the early 20th century, after the Russian Revolution, Ukraine became part of the Soviet Union. Despite periods of political separation, the cultural and historical connections between Russia and Ukraine have remained strong. The idea of a unified East Slavic heritage is deeply embedded in both Russian and Ukrainian cultures. Putin, however, uses this historical narrative to justify his actions. He claims that the regions of Ukraine that Russia has annexed or is seeking to control should rightfully belong to Russia because of these deep-rooted connections. In his view, Ukraine and Russia were once one entity that became divided over time. But there's more to this assertion than simply cultural ties. The geopolitical stakes. The story of Putin's invasion of Ukraine cannot be understood without considering the geopolitical stakes. For decades, Ukraine has been moving westward, seeking greater ties with Europe, and notably, hoping to join NATO. NATO's expansion, particularly its encroachment on Russia's borders, has been a major source of concern for Putin. The desire for Ukraine to join NATO is a direct challenge to Russia's security, particularly because NATO is a military alliance that Russia sees as a threat. The possibility of NATO missiles and forces stationed just hundreds of miles from Moscow is something that Putin finds unacceptable. This concern was clearly articulated in 2008 when NATO declared that Ukraine could one day join the alliance. The Bucharest Summit Declaration, which included this announcement, sparked a series of events that would lead to the tensions we see today. Putin's objections to Ukraine's NATO aspirations are not just ideological. They are rooted in a long history of Russia's deep-seated fear of foreign military threats. During the Cold War, Russia's sphere of influence extended over Eastern Europe, and NATO was perceived as an existential threat. The fall of the Soviet Union left Russia vulnerable, with its security buffer zones shrinking as former Soviet states sought membership in Western institutions. The annexation of Crimea and the Donbas conflict. The situation escalated dramatically in 2014, when Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, a pro-Russian leader, was ousted during the Maidan Revolution. Russia saw this as a direct threat to its influence in the region. Putin's response was swift and decisive. In February 2014, Russian forces invaded Crimea, a region with a significant ethnic Russian population. The annexation of Crimea was followed by the outbreak of war in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists declared independence in Donetsk and Luhansk. These events marked the beginning of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has claimed thousands of lives and caused immense human suffering. The West responded with economic sanctions, but Putin's resolve only hardened. Crimea's annexation is seen by Putin as a restoration of Russia's historical claim to the region, furthering his narrative of Ukraine being part of Russia's legacy. Putin's historical justification. In 2021, Putin took this argument a step further with the publication of a lengthy essay titled "On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians." In the essay, Putin claims that Ukrainians and Russians are fundamentally the same people, united by shared history and culture. The essay, which has been widely criticized, is part of Putin's broader effort to legitimize his actions in Ukraine. However, scholars and historians, including those from the University of Rochester, have dismissed much of the narrative as exaggerated to suit Putin's agenda. Ukraine, like many other countries, has a long and independent history. Although the Ukrainian and Russian cultures have intertwined over the centuries, Ukraine's national identity has remained distinct. For Putin to suggest that Ukraine is merely an extension of Russia overlooks the complex history of Ukrainian independence, including its brief period of sovereignty in the 17th and 18th centuries, and its status as an independent nation after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The resources of Ukraine, a strategic prize. Beyond historical and cultural justifications, Putin's interest in Ukraine is also driven by economic and strategic factors. Ukraine is rich in natural resources, many of which are of immense value to Russia and the global economy. The country has vast reserves of coal, particularly in the Donbas region, and its fertile soil makes it one of the world's leading producers of grain. Before the war, Ukraine was responsible for a significant portion of global wheat exports, making it a key player in global food security. Moreover, Ukraine's proximity to key energy pipelines has made it an important player in Europe's energy landscape. While Ukraine itself does not have significant natural gas reserves, its strategic location as a transit country for Russian gas exports makes it highly valuable. As the EU has sought to reduce its dependence on Russian energy sources, Ukraine's role in the energy market has only grown in importance. In addition to its energy resources, Ukraine is also home to significant deposits of metals, including iron, steel, and rare earth minerals. These resources are vital for Russia, particularly as the global economy shifts away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy sources. Ukraine's metal industry is much more advanced than Russia's, giving it a potential edge in the new global energy landscape. Demographic concerns. The birthrate crisis. Another key factor driving Putin's actions in Ukraine is Russia's demographic crisis. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia has faced a sharp decline in its fertility rate. In 1989, the fertility rate was at a replacement level, but by the early 2000s, it had dropped significantly. This demographic decline has led to a shrinking population and an aging workforce, which poses long-term challenges for Russia's economy and security. Putin has long been concerned about Russia's population decline and its impact on the country's future. With Ukraine's population of around 40 million, absorbing Ukraine could provide a temporary solution to Russia's demographic problem. While this wouldn't solve Russia's population crisis, it would buy the country some time by adding a significant number of people to its population base. A geopolitical gamble. Ultimately, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is not just about restoring historical ties or defending Russia's security. It is about positioning Russia for the future. With an economy increasingly dependent on oil and gas exports and a declining population, Putin sees Ukraine as a way to secure Russia's future power and influence in the region. However, this gamble has not paid off as Putin had hoped. The war has dragged on for years, and the economic sanctions imposed by the West have severely hurt Russia's economy. Ukraine, meanwhile, has strengthened its ties with the West, making NATO membership more likely than ever before. Thanks for watching, folks. If you found this deep dive into Putin's motivations intriguing, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Your support helps us bring more insights your way. Stay tuned, and we'll catch you in the next one.